This is the I Read Comic Books podcast, the best comic book podcast for regular comic fans. I'm your host, Mike Rapin, and joining me this week, two teenage girls who I will ultimately befriend because we need to save the world from the enemy, Kara
Hey.
and Paloma.
Hello, hello, hello.
Thank you both for joining me this week. I'm very excited because today we are talking about Sailor Moon, a thing that it turns out, know absolutely nothing about. And the two of you, according to our notes, know a lot about. So I'm really excited to get to that in the second half. But for now, we're going to be talking about comic books because I have two legally mandated questions for you. And that is, how have you been? How have comic books been? Let's start with you, Paloma.
I've been pretty great, Mike. Last week, my city had a Comic-Con. I kind of just sped run it because I was just there to see two people, and it wasn't a payday week. So I was like, let me just support my friends. And then have Doc Shaner sign some of my variant covers for World's Finest Teen Titans. So
Nice.
Pretty great. Comics are great. I had the wonderful pleasure of reading Unlikely Story of Felix and Macabber. It's written by Hassan Otsmane Elhau. I think does a lot of lettering in comics, but first time writing, I believe. And then the artist is Juniba, one of my absolute favorite artists right now. He's done Jalea, which is kind of like a older teens, like West African fantasy story. And then Monkey Meat, which was like a dystopian, like capitalist commentary food industry thing that I really liked. And so Unlikely Story of Felix and Macabber. It's a world of monsters, and Felix is a little monster that gets bullied constantly. He's very weak, bullied at home by his dad as well. And he meets Macabber, who's an old curmudgeon wrestler. We find out he used to be a hero. And it's a classic don't meet your heroes / the complexities of adults and leaving your friends behind for fame.
What?
It was a wild ride. I thought it was going to be a cute old man little boy story. And there was depth and emotion and layers, and one of those classics like, would a kid understand the depths here?
So you went for the bulk of the film Up, but you got the first 5 minutes on loop.
Yes.
Okay.
Maybe not that devastating, but devastating in a very different way. Really great. You can tell how much like Junie Ba loves designing monsters, very unique monster designs. We see Felix grow up and live his life, and like stuff change there. So it's cute to see his little monster form grow up and see what it looks like as an adult. It was a really quick read. I would recommend it, I guess. I wasn't expected wrestling, but if you like wrestling, it's cool. Maybe there's wrestlers out there that have a similar experience where you betray everyone that ever loved you for fame. I'm not sure. That's not my genre.
I'm sure that's been a storyline in the WWE at some point, right? Like, but no, this is interesting because I've been waiting to get my copy of this book for a few weeks, which is funny because I like went to Midtown when Brian and Kate came to visit, and they had it at the shop, but it like wasn't out until November, so I was kind of surprised. But yeah, I've been meaning to take a look at this because it's pretty like oversized, right? Like it's a big book.
Yeah.
Right? Or am I thinking of something else completely?
He just also had one come out that he's like doing something with Mobius. That one's definitely
maybe
oversized.
That's what it was. Okay.
That's
well, regardless, I have seen art from this, and it looks really pretty. Like you said, Junie Ba loves to design monsters, and Monkey Meat is full of monsters, and I love that book for that reason. So this sounds really exciting.
Yeah, that's been my scene lately. Kara, how about you? How have you been? How are comics?
Well, how have I been? I have been doing the most, and now I'm burned out. So I am going into hibernation mode where I address the stacks and stacks of books and comic books that I have been hoarding and not reading. A feeling everyone listening to this show, I'm sure, knows very well.
Yes.
So recently I spoke on this show about how I am a Hickman hater for no absolute reason. I have no understanding of why people love Jonathan Hickman's work, and I just decided to get really upset about it for no good reason. But then I was like, no, personal growth. Let us give him a shot. Let's try some Jonathan Hickman. Let's see how I feel. I'll make an adult informed decision. And then I was like, oh, hey, I'm going to go read Hoxpox, House of X, Powers of X, because that was a thing that I know he did that was kind of recent and super buzzy, and like everyone was reading it, and I had a lot of FOMO. Okay, so it was on Hoopla. I was like, great, it's on Hoopla. I'm going to read this book right now and see how I feel. And you know what? I already read it. And I could not remember that I had read it because that is how forgettable that story was for me. I am so mad. I got like 10 pages in it. I was like, oh, wait a minute. Like, I probably already talked about this book on the show and I forgot. I probably already had this conversation with Mike. We're living in a time loop like Moira McTaggart, and the only genuinely cool part of this work, have I mentioned how mad I am? So then I read the entire 300 pages out of spite.
Oh my God.
And I have to say, for those of you at home, Mike is clutching his face right now. So reading this, I have to say, why are mutants? Like, there are a bajillion superheroes in the Marvel Universe, and the only ones who have this specific DNA thing going on are the hated ones, quote unquote, but everyone else with powers is somehow fine. And just like reading this book, I feel like this metaphor for oppression that Marvel used back in the 60s has like way outlived its usefulness, and the mutants need to be integrated into the rest of Marvel. Like, I know that some of them have been on other teams in other points, but it just feels like a bit of a dead horse in terms of like, everyone hates us, mutants versus humans forever. And I'm like, you're telling me in a world where people are aware of aliens and still have their own petty infighting and geopolitical conflicts that the X-Men are the biggest threat to humanity somehow?
Well, here's the thing, Kara.
Big yawn.
Anyone could be an X-Men and you would never know. Your child could wake up one day and suddenly be an X-Men and you would have no way to know, you know?
Who cares? Your kid could grow like what?
That's the thing. It's a metaphor for all of the things that are really, really stupid in society that people suddenly have prejudice about simply because
but Mike,
they can. I don't know. Marvel does ham it up. I'm not gonna lie. I will. They ham it up.
You're telling me that the Fantastic Four are fine, but the X-Men are not fine just because of the way in which they got their powers. It makes no sense.
Yeah.
It makes no sense. And I'm mad about it. But
listen, there was an entire storyline about this called Civil War. Let me introduce you to Mark Millar's Civil War. We can talk about this. I'd be happy to.
I'm really mad about it. Okay, things that I did like. I did like the Moira McTaggart time loop issue thing. That thing was rad. That was an example of the kind of storytelling that comics can do really well, where by just you don't have a budget, so you can do so much, and it's so good. And that's the part where I was like, you know what? This should be a miniseries. I would watch the hell out of this show if it was a miniseries on Disney Plus. Other things that were good. Mr. Sinister, obsessed with Mr. Sinister. I know nothing about him except he shows up in this and he's apparently cloned himself, and he's like one of those like gleefully bad villains who's just like, yeah, I'll shank my clone. I'm in charge now. What's up? Let's deal.
Yeah. Yes.
He's just like, I want a cape. I want a cape. Why don't I have a cape? I'm like, why don't you have a cape, Mr. Sinister?
Mm-hmm.
My other delight was the mutant who grows the balls that are gold and glowing. Gold balls, right. And I'm sure it was such a good plot twist that the balls were actually unfertilized eggs that couldn't be fertilized unless another mutant would help fertilize them to grow corpses, husks of other proto-mutants. But I'm sure that if I was an X fan, I would have like thrown my comic across the room when I got to that part, because it was it's so bad and so good at the same time that Gold Balls is actually the most functional mutant of them all.
Here's the thing. When Gold Balls was introduced, I about threw my comic across the room because of how stupid of a concept of a character he was.
But like, what a great retcon. What a great retcon.
It's a great retcon.
Character.
I totally agree.
I loved that. And then I got to the end of Hoxpox, this great big acclaimed event that has some really interesting moments trapped in a larger microcosm that overall I did not care for, because I realized it was just 300 pages of exposition for a storyline that would then continue.
Yep.
Comics, everyone. And I got to the end and I'm like, why are we on Endor? Why is it Endor? at the end of Return of the Jedi, with the Ewoks and the tree houses and the fireworks, I had the music playing in my head, like reading that scene. Like, I'm expecting to see Anakin Skywalker's Force Ghost pop up. Like, tell me you love Star Wars without telling me you love Star Wars,
Right.
Jonathan Hickman. Like, Jesus Christ. So, anyways, I got through it again. Maybe I'll forget that I read it again, and we'll have this conversation again 6 months from now.
Just every year,
so
Kara
mad.
comes back to Hoxbox, and it's just
keep
like
reading it. And you know what? I was also proud of myself for recognizing some X-Men characters. Like I recognized Apocalypse. I recognized Apocalypse because I read Age of Apocalypse and do remember nothing about that one except Cyclops' hair. So I guess the X-Men are just forgettable to me. So, but yeah, I'm proud of myself. And also, interestingly, the whole time I'm reading this, I'm just thinking about what, Mike, you were trying to explain to me the last time. I was like, Jonathan Hickman, and you were like, oh, he creates these like intricate cogs within cogs within cogs of a plot.
Yeah.
And while reading this, I got that, but also my brain manifested it for some reason as a Polly Pocket. So I'm reading Hoxpox and I'm like, yes, the Polly Pocket of the X-Men reboot.
This is
this tiny little
perfect.
world.
This is absolutely perfect, because why can't we get the Krakoan Polly Pocket that opens up and it's got your favorite 5 mutants inside of it?
I would buy the hell out of that.
Easy. Yes.
Like, hello, it's right that I want to hold it in the palm of my hand. I want to feel the power of Magneto.
With Marvel marketing. Yes. And Magneto hovers on the inside because there's All right, we'll talk about it in the break. Well, Kara, I'm glad that you revisited Hoxpox because you deeply love it. It's not because you forgot; it's because you love it.
Forgot it entirely, Mike.
Sure. Whatever you need to say. Let me talk about a book. I am out of it in all sorts of ways. I got my vaccine yesterday and it's just kicking my butt. I've been spending all of my time reading Old Boy. Because we're talking about that on the IRCB Movie Club this month. So I really didn't have a lot to read, or I didn't read a lot, I should say, this past week. But I did manage to sit down and read a couple books because I had a little bit of free time between volumes of 250-page volumes of Old Boy and writing on Substack. Follow me on Substack. That's just a self-plug. I did read Sacrificers number 3 and 4. This is by Rick Remender with art by Max Fumera, colors by Dave McCagg. Holy moly, this book rules. I don't know if you guys have had a chance to look at this book or just Google it really quick and you'll see the art for this book. It's enough to really, really pull you in. I don't know how Rick Remender does it, but he pairs himself up with some of the most incredible artists that can do some of the most insane sci-fi / fantasy epic stuff that you just, I don't know, it's very rare to see in comics, I think. These are super painterly folks that are just like putting 150,000% into their books, and I totally love it. Sacrificers is no different. The first 2 issues of this book are kind of about this. There's this mystery of there are gods, and the gods are real beings, and a child from every tribe in this land gets sacrificed. They get taken away and taken to meet the gods. In issues 3 and 4, we kind of find out where these kids are going, and we find out what's actually going on with these gods, why they want these kids, why it's a tradition. And we get to meet one of the sun god's daughter and how she's finally growing up and starting to learn a little bit about like what her family has been doing for generations. She is the daughter of the sun and the moon, and the sun and the moon basically hate each other. It's awesome. So this book is a lot of fun. It's very, very beautiful. I mean, fun is the wrong word. It's a devastating read, but it's very good at paying off little seeds very early. Like, I don't know, I think over the past 8 years of recording this show, I've gone left and right, up and down with Rick Remender's books, but I keep coming back to his books because they always find a way to like put a hook in me that I just want to read a lot of it. And Sacrificers is one of those books that works really well month to month. I think is going to be even better as trades because you're going to get these really concise arcs. Like I can tell the way that this arc is building up, it's going to be amazing. I don't know if this is a limited series, this is ongoing, but I just want more of this book because Max Fumera's art is unbelievable. Like I think when I read issue 4, I went back and reread it because I just wanted to look at all of the various deities that we get to meet in that issue. There's so much to this book that is begging questions of like, why do all these deities exist? Why is this world the way that it is? And they touch on it just enough to keep you hyper interested by the end of issue 4. And there's a good enough twist that I'm like, this feels very big in potential. Like it could be a very, very big, long running book. So I'm really excited to see where this goes. But yeah, I was very happy that we got to the punch of kind of this question mark of what are the sacrifices? Why is that so important so early in the series? So now we can actually like hit the ground running with a lot of character development and questions and twists and turns in the plot. So this book rules. I highly recommend it if you get a chance, if only just to look at the art. Like you're not going to find an artist who's doing stuff the same way that Fumera is doing things right now. And there's only a handful of like books being published that I think are at this level of quality in terms of just, I don't know. It's very impressive. So check this book out. Totally love it. Have you guys read this by chance? I don't know if you've looked at it at all.
Yeah, I've checked out issue 1 because I was hesitant to read it just because sometimes Rick Remender can just be so hit or miss, or he's like a hit and then becomes a miss as I read more. But I picked this up because it was like pretty hyped in my comics group, and issue 1 delivered hard.
Dude.
The art was crazy good. I only know Little Bird Boy, and I was like, bird expressions are so sad.
Yeah. The book does follow this one little bird boy who's like a little pigeon kid. And your heart breaks for him over and over because he's the sacrificed one of his family, and his family like ostracizes him because they know that they can't be close to him because he's gonna leave someday. So he's lived his life as this like outsider with his family of like multiple, and they've always had to keep him at a distance because they knew one day he was going to leave. It's like, it's so heartbreaking, right? And then he meets up with a bunch of other kids that are on this walking train that are essentially going to go to this kingdom where the deities are. Oh, man. Again, breaks your heart. And I totally feel what you're saying, Paloma. Like, Rick Remender can be very hit and then it turns into a miss.
Yeah.
I'm not feeling that 4 issues into this book, and I feel like that's a good pace for his writing. Like, if it's going to miss, it's by issues 3 or 4. This book totally rules. Oh, man, I can't get over it. But Paloma, let's bounce back to one other book that you've read. Tell us about something else that's been good.
So I am on the precipice of maybe fully committing to the Energon universe. I've not said that word out loud, but it is
Energon.
Is it Energon? Okay.
How am I to know
Commit
that?
to your inner John.
How are you to know? If it helps you, I'm the person who pronounced the chain of islands word archipelago well into my 20s. So this is just one of those words. If you don't hear someone say it, how do you know? English is a mess, and Energon is a made-up word. All words are made up.
Ooh.
We made up all of language. Anyways.
We don't have time for that philosophical debate. Paloma, tell us about Transformers #2 before we get too deep.
Ooh, it was great. I loved issue 1. I can't believe I have a Transformers book in the year of 2023 on my pull list.
Same.
It's written and drawn by Daniel Warren Johnson, who I love, and I feel like everybody loves. And yeah, I love just learning about Autobots and Decepticons. I won't know a dang person's name who isn't Optimus or Bumblebee, but that's irrelevant right now. Cliffjumper? Maybe I'm learning.
Now you know Cliffjumper.
Okay.
Yep. That's
Starscream?
Yes.
Megatron?
Megatron.
I friggin' love this series. Issue 2 is just everything I wanted and more. My favorite, a highlight for me was certainly the Decepticons calling humans squishies.
Yes.
Right before squishing them, Starscream just like claps an airman in midair and just smashes him all over the place. And I was like, hell yeah, Starscream. I mean, no, that would be terrifying if it was real life, but it's a comic book, so hell yeah, Starscream.
Yeah, I don't know how the Autobots win. Like, just seeing like a variant cover, it's Optimus, the girl Transformer, Cliffjumper, and another small one, and I'm like, they're outmanned, they're out-heighted. How are they winning?
First of all, there's more than one girl. Second of all, the girl one is RC. Third of all, can we really ascribe gender in a binary to non-biological extraterrestrials? Come on, people.
all valid things. So, Paloma, I'm curious. The Energon universe, does that include other books? Does this include Void Rivals somehow? Or am I going crazy?
Yes. It
Okay.
started with Void Rivals #1, which I also just read, and I wish I had added that to my pull list before all the other issues were gone. But yeah, it starts there, and it also includes the G.I. Joe people.
Oh, right.
That
Okay.
that one I might just read for free, and not add it to my subscription list.
Sure.
That one
sure.
for me is like, show me the Snake Eyes miniseries. I know it's coming. I'll read that one.
Mm-hmm. I think I'm gonna at least check out the #1 for GI Joe. I've never been a GI Joe person, like in any capacity, but who knows? This new thing. I never thought I'd be pulling Transformers in the year 2023. So anything is possible, I think. But I'm glad that you're enjoying it. I have yet to read this issue, so I'm very excited to check it out. Mostly because when I was reading the first issue, I was like, I didn't think it was possible for me to care about someone with the last name Witwicky, and here we are in 2023, and
Well,
that's happening.
Mike, that's
So-
because you made the mistake of watching all the movies, for which I'm
Right.
sorry, but
Yes. But go back and listen to that episode before I go into a tangent. But Danny on our call is showing us his Transformers DVDs. Oh boy. Kara, tell us about another book that you read.
oh, so gladly, Mike, because
Okay.
this is a rare moment where I'm continuing storylines from previous episodes.
Thank you.
So previously, we spoke about Booster Gold and Blue Beetle, two heroes in the DC universe who became best friends during their time on Justice League International in the 80s, a team that DC will not let die and keeps revisiting and revisiting and revisiting.
Mhm.
And we were challenged to read Booster Gold 52 pickup by one of our lovely patrons. Thank you for your support. Support us on Patreon, and you too can make me read something that I thought I would never have to read again.
Right.
So,
yes. Totally true.
right. So we read Booster Gold 52 pickup, and it just like slam dunked my brain back into 2009. And I got to the end of that volume, and I was like, well, this was a hot mess, but I kind of want to keep going, especially now that we have Booster Gold and Blue Beetle as like the team up in the next volume. So I read the next volume, and you know what? I fucking loved it. It was so dumb and so good. It was like time travel, reassembling the Justice League International, Mr. Mind, who I had forgot about as a character, and then they brought him back. Mr. Mind is a bug. I want you to envision a cartoon caterpillar with enormous eyes and glasses.
Mm-hmm.
And he crawls into your brain and takes over your brain because
Okay.
like a good and bad thing about the DCU is that they never let characters go. So suddenly you're in the Silver Age in terms of aesthetics and storytelling because they will not let characters go. So
fans of Animorphs are very familiar with this concept as well. Yes, the slugs that go in your ear and they take over your brain. Yeah, totally.
So I took a screenshot of my favorite part of the whole book, which was Blue Beetle, a costumed hero, saying from one bug to another, buzz off, while squishing Mr. Mind with his foot because Mr. Mind is a tiny caterpillar.
Amazing.
And there are like who's like mind controlling the bad guy. And then he like swarms out of the bad guy he's been mind controlling because there are thousands of him. But it's just like the bad guy covered in thousands of tiny little green caterpillars with big eyes that look like they belong in a Mickey Mouse cartoon. And you're just like, what am I reading? Who approved this? DC. Why?
DC was letting Jeff Johns do whatever he wanted, okay?
But like, this is what I want from a DC comic, because once I got over my whole like, DC is the worst, you have to know 40 years of continuity to enjoy yourself. But like, once you know that 40 years of continuity, it's super fun. Like, it's real great. You just like, there's a plot twist at the end that I had either never read in the first place or totally forgot about, and it was great, and I am reeling from it, and now I want to keep reading, and I've already checked out the next book in the series. So, much
Keep
like
us updated.
Well, much like you all saying, I didn't realize that we would be in 2023 and having Transformers on my pull list. Didn't realize I would be in 2023 going all in on Booster Gold, like That's
just
where
a
I'm
very
at.
long, it's a very long, elaborate ploy to convince DC that they should make a Booster Gold movie. And it make no sense, but
I would watch the hell out of that. That would make they could do that very well if they made it like a social commentary about it, SpawnCon. Like Booster Gold is a TikTok influencer and he's got like all these like tie-ins. If they did it like Josie and the Pussycats and like went all in on the parody and
right,
satire of
right.
it, chef's kiss. Do that, DC. I know you won't, so
They
don't
don't have the
actually do it.
guts.
But like,
They don't have the guts.
Archie would do it. Archie would have the balls.
Mm-hmm. Give the license to Archie. That's what I'm hearing. Let me talk about another book really quick before we get to the top of our pile. I read The Space Between #1. This is by Corinna Becco, art by Danny Luckhart. Nick pitched this last week on the show, and I was totally sold on it. This flew under my radar, and man, I really, really loved it. The basic idea of this series is it's an anthology where each issue follows a different pair of people as they go about living in a far-flung realistic sci-fi future, and they deal with love and survival and liberation and like what does classism look like in the future, what does love look like in the future when like humanity has moved beyond living on Earth, right? It's a really cool book. The first issue is quick to kind of push the narrative forward, but I feel like with a limited page count it kind of works well enough. The strangers to friends to more than that ? You really should read it to find out. It's pretty cute. Becco manages to tell like a really simple romantic story in an unbelievably rich world without like bogging you down with too many details of the world. There isn't a lot of exposition dump. There isn't a lot of lore dumping. You get little bits and pieces of information based on communication between people. You get a stranger from a different world, and in heavy quotes, that falls into this new world and doesn't understand how things are, truly asking questions. Well, above we do this and below you do this. Like there's that kind of thing, which is nice. There's like I don't know, I feel like there's a very small middle ground in anthology comics, especially some that like share a universe where there's like a bombardment of information or not enough information to feel connected, and like Becco manages to land right in that perfect middle ground spot to try to get you invested in the characters as well as the world that all of these stories I believe are going to take place in, without again lore dumping. It's an impressive feat. She's clearly a master at it. Meanwhile, Luckhart's art is very fun. It's almost stereotypically Star Trek or Expanse or Alien or gritty sci-fi in like how heavy the line work is. And I think if you've ever read any of the more modern Star Trek or Alien or Expanse books, you know what I mean. Like there's something about this realistic sci-fi thing that happens where there's just a ton of really heavy line work, and not a lot of shading, and the color palettes are usually kind of muted. And I feel like that's exactly what happens in this book. And it's not bad, but I think page 1, if you've experienced any of those other types of books, you know exactly what kind of story you're getting into. So me diving in, having read books like that kind, I knew exactly like the vibe that this book was going for with its line work and its color palette and stuff. This is like, it clicked immediately as being a realistic sci-fi. So, it's very immersive. Like the opening scene of this book is really cool. There's a heavy action scene that like really roots you into what our main character is going through and what she's trying to accomplish. And the action is very, very well done. So if you're looking for a nice sci-fi book, I think this is a cool one to pick up. Probably will be good as a trade, as just like a quick anthology that takes place over a series of issues about characters. But honestly, just as a one-off, if you're just like looking for a random book, like this one's perfect, because you get a whole story one and done, and that's it. And if you pick up the next ones, maybe it'll minorly connect because it's in the same universe, but it's not, I think, important for you to have read the first issue. So that's kind of cool. Yeah, that's The Space Between. But let's move on. Let's talk about comics that are on the top of our pile. This is a new comic, an old comic, or just something you're looking to get off your shelf. Some book that you're looking forward to reading next. Before we get into our picks, I want to shout out the folks that are hanging out with us on Discord. Paul G is reading Parasocial next. That was almost my pick for this week, which is crazy. Hugh is reading Blade #5, and Danny is reading Big Game #5. I don't know what Big Game is, so Danny, tell us about it in the comments. But I guess let's bounce over to Kara. What's on the top of your pile?
Well, since this is my life now, I am going to continue to read the Booster Gold series and also the newer stuff, because this is just what my life is right now. And then related to that, I picked up Fire and Ice #3. Fire and Ice are two characters from Justice League International that I really like. They also showed up in the Justice League Unlimited animated show, if you watched that. And they are like best friends. A lot of people ship them. It depends on your interpretation of the subtext. And they are currently, for reasons, in Smallville in a hair salon. And Superman's mom is watching over them. Unclear what happened. I haven't been
Sure.
reading DC, but like I like their chemistry. They seem to be, this comic book seems to be doing something like what She-Hulk was doing, where they're like, oh, let's make this sort of a self-contained piece, and there's like side characters that show up like just specifically in this book. And then if people like Superman fly in for an issue, like that's fine. And I really like smaller scale superhero stories like this, so I'm interested to see where it goes. But I hate so much why I haven't stopped thinking about this series because, you know, going back a few minutes ago to my comment about DC Comics is fun if you know 40 years of continuity, they had a cliffhanger for Fire and Ice that involved a character named, spoilers if you haven't read Fire and Ice #2, just skip ahead right now, that involved Ambush Bug, a character that I hate that I know. I hate that it's an exciting selling point for me. And we do not have time to get into Ambush Bug as a character and a concept and like a meta commentary on the DC universe. But suffice to say, I went back to a comic book shop to pick up issue 3. Very convenient that it also was out the day that Transformers #2 was out. But regardless, I'm now back going to comic book shops for Fire and Ice and for Transformers. So Fire and Ice next on my to be read pile.
Well, that's exciting. I only know Fire and Ice, whatever their actual names are. I don't remember.
Tora and
but
Beaches.
Yeah, they were in Human Target, which I read that fun little Tom King book that he did with Greg Smallwood, where Greg Smallwood draws Ice as maybe the most beautiful woman I've ever seen on page, not in like a voluptuous blah blah blah. There's like this close up of her face where I'm like, Greg Smallwood doesn't like comic books. He just loves this woman. He wants to draw this face. It's like, I don't know. I've never like looked at a page like that and been like moved by like how beautiful it was, but holy smokes, one of the issues in that run, just unbelievable. Just the absolutely, I don't know. It's very much like Breakfast at Tiffany's ripoff, like the way the look that she's giving.
Sure.
But it's still, I was just like floored by it. And I remember just being like, I gotta put this down and like think about something else because I'm getting all confabulated in my head. But anyways, so that's how I know those characters.
Well, clearly
because they all show up in Human Target.
I have to add Human Target to my list now because I didn't even know that was a thing. I'm gonna see if my library has that right now.
From my understanding, DC fans out there, please write me if I'm wrong. This is very much like a spin-off in a very loose way of the Keith Giffen like JLI, if I'm not mistaken. Like those characters basically make up the entirety of the cast, as Human Target, the main character, is trying to figure out who accidentally poisoned him to death. That's like opening on page 1. But Kara, you should read it. Let me know what you think. I'd be very curious. But let me talk about a book really quick that I'm excited to read, and that is Dogsred number 2 through 8. This is like chapters on the Viz manga app. This is created by Satoru Noda, and the reason I bring up 2 through 8 is because that's all that's out. This is a brand new-ish series from the creator of Golden Kamuy, and I've never read Golden Kamuy, but it's a it's a story about like the Russo-Japanese war that happened back in the day. It has like a lot of very like political things in it. So I never dove into it, but I've heard it's very good. It's very, very well loved. Every manga shop that I go to usually has this book, or they have like action figures and stuff from it, which is crazy to me to think that like a historical record of a war could like turn into a manga that people were like, I want this general's action figure. Please God, American comic book creators, don't even fucking think about it. Just don't. But anyways, Golden Kamuy, very celebrated book. It ended, I think, middle of last year, and this is the new series by Satoru Noda. And the story is basically a young teenager, best ice skating person in his town, in his middle school, gets this near perfect score in one of the final rounds of this tournament and ice skating, goes a little ballistic and ends up leaving town with his twin sister to go stay with their estranged grandpa, who was estranged from their mom. In that little town, the main character finds out, oh, there's this beautiful lake that I can go skate on. I still love to skate, but I gave up my dreams because of reasons we haven't discovered yet in the story, where he runs into the brother of this superstar hockey player. And there's a little bit of a tussle, but the main character kind of sneaks away from the fight because he's so good at ice skating. He's like, you hockey guys are too brutish. You'd never be able to catch me. And that's like the end of chapter 1. And it's so good. It's so funny. It's so well drawn. It's one of those books that I just am so excited to read the next 8 chapters, and I'm so bummed that there aren't like another 400 after this. Like, this is the type of series that if there was 400 chapters, I would just not stop reading it until I got caught up. And yeah, this book is very, very pretty. Very well drawn. All the characters are really well rounded in the first chapter, which is like 65 pages. And we get some interesting bits of back and forth and question marks that end the chapter really, really interestingly. That makes me immediately want to dive into chapter 2. So if you get a chance, check this out because it looks really, really fun.
But Mike, do the hockey player and ice skater fall in love?
Well, we're not sure. I'm not sure yet. There is definitely that trope, and it totally exists in multiple other stories. But we'll see if that's a thing. Shonen Jump isn't completely scared of doing a story like that, right? They published was it Blue Flag, about like a basketball player and his semi-nerdy friend, and they kind of like and love each other. It's a fun book. But anyways, before we dig into all of that, Paloma, tell us about a book that's on the top of your pile before we go into the break.
I just picked up my copy of Chromatic Fantasy by H.A. It's a Silver Sprocket book. Beautifully bound if you get the physical copy. Like the outside pages are all golden. So I'm just a sucker for that kind of shiny stuff. And what I really like about it is like the queer leads. Like a quick little snippet is Jules is a trans man trapped in his life as a nun. The devil that the convent guards against offers him a deal to escape an illicit tryst and lifelong possession. Just sounds cool.
What?
Just sounds cool as heck.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
Wow. I've had this on my forever, like it's open in a tab of like, Mike, when you have a couple bucks, it's time to buy this.
Yes.
This sounds really cool. It looks beautiful. The art preview is incredible for this book. What drew you to it?
The online hype was pretty wild. Like a lot of cool Silver Sprocket artists like Hugo Limbo had like a lot to say about it. And then one of my friends who has great taste loved it. And it's just been like skyrocketing people's like top of the year list. And we've been seeing a lot of like trans for trans relationships like from Silver Sprocket books lately. So that's always cool to see. So yeah, I'm really hyped for this. The art looks amazing, and I just feel like it's inspiring for like making a comic too.
Yeah, this is a beautiful looking book. You've convinced me I need to make the actual pull the trigger and buy this book and add it to my pile of like at least a dozen Silver Sprocket books that I've bought in the last 6 months. Like I just can't help myself. But that's very exciting. Well, let's take a quick break then, and when we come back, we're going to be talking about Sailor Moon. And
get excited, Mike.
If you aren't watching the video live with us, I guess, or if you're not watching the video or watching this on YouTube or some capacity, Kara's completely dressed up. It's going to be a very magical thing. So we'll be back in just a second. Before we get into the second half of the show, I want to remind everybody that they can follow us on the internet at Instagram, TikTok, Discord. We've got a Goodreads. We've got a YouTube channel. If you're not a member, what are you doing with your time? Come follow us on the internet. We try to post some pretty interesting stuff, and you're missing it constantly. As always, though, you can follow us on Patreon at patreon.com/IRCB podcast. You can join for free and get access to all the public stuff that we post just on Patreon, as well as subscribe today, and you can get access to our very intricate number of shows, a large number of shows. I don't know what I'm saying here. Better Batmobile, Saga of Saga, Giant Days of Our Lives, IRCB Movie Club, which is dropping this month. You can do all that at patreon.com/IRCB podcast. So let's get into today's topic. Today we are talking about Sailor Moon. I wrote it with 100 O's. But before we get into discussing the iconic character known as Sailor Moon, Kara, I know you wanted to break down the idea of what magical girl manga is. So why don't you tell the folks at home what that is? And then we're going to talk about my first foray into Sailor Moon, which was an experience.
Oh, I'm so excited. All of this comes from Wikipedia, the ultimate source of truth for all things. Absolutely does not need to be interrogated at all. That's sarcasm. Always interrogate your sources on Wikipedia. But I wanted to get the overview of the magical girl manga genre, because when most people think of that genre, they are thinking of Sailor Moon or a manga or anime property that Sailor Moon has inspired. But I was interested to learn that actually the magical girl manga genre arguably started in the 1960s with the character Sally the Witch, which was inspired by the American TV show Bewitched. And
Oh.
that anime introduced the concept of using like a makeup compact to instigate your magical transformation into an alter ego. So like hallmarks of the genre include like the manga is focused on a young girl with magical powers and usually manifests the magical powers through an alter ego, and usually there's like magical accessories and toys or like weapons, but they're all like very, very feminized. I was interested to learn that in the 70s, most of the magical girl anime were witch based. And then magical girl became the broader term in the 80s. And it was interesting to learn that a lot of the characters at the time who fell into this category were young girls who, through their magical transformation, would turn into like women versions of themselves. And it's interesting that that was happening at a time when women in Japan were getting more rights and opportunities. So I was like, the parallels. Like, give people agency and look at that, they become adults. But I think the genre really took off with Sailor Moon in the early 90s. Sailor Moon like centered the female characters as protagonists with agency, who were unmistakably feminine in their dress and interest, but who were tough as fuck. Citation me. And I was less interested to learn that now the genre is apparently targeted towards a more adult and male audience. And that was distressing to learn because I didn't actually really grow up watching the Sailor Moon anime. I think it was on Cartoon Network at like 6 a.m. And I was never up that early, so that didn't register for me. But I got into it reading the manga that I bought like used copies of on eBay in like the early 2000s. And I'm really glad that my introduction was the manga, because the anime was redrawn and refocused by a bunch of men for like kind of a male gazy audience. But the manga was drawn and created by Naoko Takeuchi, a woman, for girls. And it's way more of a female perspective. And I'm really glad that my introduction was the manga. And now, Mike, that your introduction has been the manga and you didn't read this as a teen girl whose life was transformed by it, tell me your thoughts. You're coming in as
some would say that inside all of us is a teen girl. No. No, actually, so my familiarity with Sailor Moon is pretty much what I pitched at the top of the show. It's a character I've seen at conventions. I knew it was a thing. I knew plenty of women liked it. It was an anime, but I really didn't know anything other than like there's a Sailor Moon and Neptune and Mars and Pluto. Maybe I don't really know. So like I was very much went into this like having very little knowledge. But I guess before I expound on my journey, I am curious, Paloma. What's your experience with Sailor Moon? How did you go from just an average person to reading Sailor Moon and being forever changed?
So I grew up watching the anime first as like a little kid. And I remember my aunt made me like a Sailor Moon costume for Halloween. And everyone thought I was Wonder Woman, except one other girl knew I was Sailor Moon. So I was just a big fan of the anime. I had some old manga like translations. It was before Tokyo Pop had the license. Maybe Tokyo Pop first had the license, and they called her Bunny, which is Usagi, means bunny in English, and that's her name. But in the anime, her name was Serena Moon. So I was like, who is Bunny? But I grew up watching the anime and then reading that, what I thought was a weird translation at the time. So it wasn't until maybe like when I was a teen or even early an adult where I went back and like read some of like the newer, prettier translations that they've done. But it was formative for me, especially back as like a youth. I was very much tomboy, where like I was into Dragon Ball Z and action figures. But Sailor Moon was unique, where she was super girly and she won me over. And I was not a girly girl back at in those days. But I love her. I don't know if people will see this. I've had this since I was a youth. It's
VHS.
Yeah, it's not canon. It's Sailor Moon R, and it was when like the anime had caught up to the manga, and this is just technically filler. And I think it's a masterpiece, maybe. It's the English dub, one of the English dubs. But
That's awesome.
Beautiful.
yeah.
Yeah, so I feel like I really didn't know much about Sailor Moon, like I said. I other than I knew that she was a teenage girl who got magical powers, and that there were like elaborate magical girl transformations, right? Like modern books like Flavor Girls, for instance, clearly inspired by like Sailor Moon in general. So I was only slightly surprised to see that the magical girl transformations in the manga were not like multi-page. She's got to do all of this stuff in her hair and her blah blah blah. Like, because I feel like that's how the anime was. Maybe that's just because of filler, right? Just because I think I've seen clips, I have enough zeitgeist context to kind of understand what Sailor Moon is, but I really had no idea what the story was about. And it turns out it's about a teenage girl who needs to stop the enemy from getting a magical crystal. And honestly, not even mad about that, because that is about as simple and easy to understand as any Power Ranger story, most of Dragon Ball Z.
Yeah.
Like, there's nothing crazy about what's going on here. It's just, it's about teenage girls. And the thing that I was really shocked by is like how like often the book doubled down on this idea of like being pretty and doing all of these feminine things. And like Usagi is, or Sailor Moon, she's weird because she wants to play at the arcade. And then it turns out like everybody loves the arcade. And then it turns out that's what their home base is. And I'm like, what the fuck is going on? So like I liked the progression. It very much felt like a kind of spoilers for Sailor Moon Eternal Volume 1. If you haven't read the first 7 chapters of Sailor Moon, we're spoiling them. But I really liked how the volume of manga that I read really covered like everything you would expect from a 90s TV show and then some. We introduce all of the characters. It's just a bunch of teen girls going out. We meet a new character every chapter. It's like every kind of manga that you've read that's been in Shonen Jump or in a lot of the popular translated series, where you're meeting all the team and then the teams together, and then every week they fight a new bad guy by cutting them in half and turning them into sand. Which is my favorite. I was like, that's the best way to get away from any kind of or any kind of like blood and all that other stuff.
Yeah.
So like, I don't know, I really liked it. I thought it was very fun. And there's so much mystery that is just like handful, like just like waved away to be like, I can't tell you that because you're not ready to hear it. And I was like, what the fuck, Luna, what the fuck is your fucking problem, dude? Like, these little girls, these teenage girls, they need context, but they're just gonna go along with things because they get to look pretty, I guess. Is that the justification? I don't really know.
I got news for you about Harry Potter, Mike. You're describing the fundamental problem of Dumbledore.
Yes.
Just tell Harry.
Yeah. But no, I thought it was fun. Like, I love that Sailor Moon Usagi is like, every time she introduces herself, she's like, I'm Usagi Tsukino. I'm 14 years old and I'm in my second year of middle school. My hobbies are eating, sleeping, and slacking off. I'm kind of a crybaby, but otherwise I'm just a normal, lovable young lady. And then she's like, one day I got these magical powers and God, it just ruins my schedule.
Well, that's why she's great as a character, because, you could open any book about a hero who needs to save the day from the bad guy, and generally they're like taking it seriously. And she's like, I need a nap. I need lunch. I want to go play a video game. Studying is the worst. I got a 30 on my math exam, and as long as my parents don't find out, it's fine. Like, and in the manga version that I have from the 90s with the quote unquote bad translation, which some of it's a little rough, but that's what I was reading. They actually kept a lot of the side matter that Naoko Takeuchi added in there for the fans that the Eternal Edition lacks, which makes me sad, where she wrote little notes to the fans. So it was kind of like letters writing into a comic book, but just the creator writing back. So that's another way that I engaged with it, was feeling like a bigger community and getting to hear what are the Japanese fans thinking about this? Because according to Naoko Takeuchi, in the first bunch of chapters of Sailor Moon, the Japanese fans weren't really connecting with Sailor Moon because it's so but you have to study and go to school and do all these things. So a lot of the fans were saying that Sailor Mercury, the nerdy one who's super smart and does all the studying, was the favorite character. So I think it was very interesting, and I would argue very this is a public service, really, that Naoko Takeuchi is there's not just one way to be a girl. because each of the Sailor Scouts has their own distinct personalities and interests. She's like, you don't have to be just the smart one. You can be any number of these things. Like my favorite character from the Inner Senshi of the core group that you just met, Mike, was always Sailor Jupiter, because I was like, wait, she's the tough, big, strong one, and she's got the best uniform with like the crisscross thing. Because like, remember, early 2000s when I was reading this, and like lace up everything was the rage. But she's also like the one who wants to like get married and open a flower shop and just bake things. I'm like, yeah. And now you see all those memes online now of people just being like, the feminine urge to open a bookshop / coffee shop / knitting shop / like, you know, all those things. I'm like, yeah, that's Sailor Jupiter. You're describing Sailor Jupiter. She's the archetype. She is what we all aspire to be now.
So this volume that I read covers the 4 main Sailor Scouts. That's what they're called, right?
Scouts, yeah.
Okay, yeah. So we get the Sailor Moon, the guardian of love and justice. We get Sailor Mercury, the guardian of water and wisdom. Sailor Mars, the guardian of fire and passion. And Sailor Jupiter, the guardian of thunder and courage. And I love that, like, they're like, here are the 4 girl types. The goofy... There's the goofy woman who's really lazy, and that's fine. And then there's the super smart girl, and then there's the religious one, and then there's the tough but lovable one. And I really love that, like, contradiction between each character is like, Sailor Moon has to be the leader, but she's also like lazy and doesn't want to step up. We've got this super smart girl who can't really find human connection. Who's supposed to be the one of wisdom, right? We've got the super religious girl who I don't really know what her contradiction was, other than she's just older and doesn't need to be hanging out with these younger girls. And then Sailor Jupiter is just like, I'm really tough, and no one likes me because I'm so tall, but I also am just secretly a romantic.
Well, I'm going to skip ahead a few chapters here, Mike, since I know you didn't have time to read, like, it's 40 plus chapters of manga for this one show. But there's a lot of this is about like their character growth and their growth as friends, and there is a whole arc in the manga where each of the inner like Sailor Scouts, Sailor Senshi, it's just the Japanese title for what they are, having to kind of face their own fears and like confront their inner demons, and they all come back to like, when Sailor Moon is doubting herself as a leader or anything, they're all like, but we love you. Like, you brought us together. We were all these little like socially isolated weirdos in our own way, and you brought us together for this greater purpose, and you love us and care about us. So like, I know that you feel useless right now, but actually we love you. So snap out of it and like take your magic wand. Let's go save the day. So I think the series resonated with me, like, not just because of the aesthetics of it, because it is a very beautiful series. I think today the critique that people would have, that I would have if this was maybe something I didn't have an emotional connection to, would be that, all these girls have really unrealistic bodies, because they're all like very, very tall. It's like Barbie on steroids almost, in that they're just not biologically possible because of how long their legs and like hands and everything are.
Sure.
Like I was recently looking at one of the many critiques of the Kardashians getting photoshopped, and a recurring one is everyone's like, Khloe Kardashian is photoshopping her hands because there's no way fingers are that long. And I look at her hands and I'm like, she's got Sailor Moon hands. Like, those are the hands that the Sailor Scout characters have,
and they look pretty. They're just like fingers as long as your face, which like out of context, that's pretty weird. But in the moment, they look nice because this is a pretty comic book. Yeah.
It's like everything's like pretty and sparkly. And, revisiting this first volume to be where you were, Mike, I was just struck again by how good the book is at creating these emotional beats of connection or tension just from a background or like an extra little interstitial panel that manga does way more than Western style comics does. Sure. Like Sailor Moon and her romantic interest, Tuxedo Mask, best name ever. He's a man in a tuxedo and a mask, and his name is Tuxedo Mask. And he shows up mysteriously at all these like crime scenes where she's defeating demons, and they have these moments. And there's all these like these subtle like glowing orbs wherever they have like a connection, if their faces are really close or if their hands are touching. And then you get more into like, ooh, like do I know you? Why do I know you?
Oh my God.
And it's just, ooh, it's so good. But you know,
Is it good?
No,
We're going to
but-
talk about it, I
no,
think.
no, no. But like reading it, you have to remember when I started reading this manga, I was the age of the protagonists.
Sure.
So I was like full on in the like, yes, this is what it's like to have a crush and to
Mhm.
make friends and to like be existing in the world as somebody who's like doesn't have it quite all together, but you want to do good and figure out your place in the world. Like it's so good in that regard. So when I tell people to read it now and they're like you, Mike, and they haven't read it and they're a guy, I'm like, I know this is not going to hit you the same way that it hit me.
Sure, yeah.
But, and I appreciate that. But like, this book became like, I swapped it around with all my friends, only if I trusted them with handling books. Because again, I was slowly collecting these off eBay and I would hand the books one at a time in a Ziploc bag and say, do not crease the spine. I was great fun at parties. Spoiler, no, I didn't go to parties in high school. Let me clear.
Right,
So
you read Sailor Moon at home.
I was reading Sailor Moon, not cracking the spine, but like, you know, but that was like another way for my friends and I to be like, oh, I identify with this scout. Oh, I like, we get to talk about it. So it's like my little like Sailor Moon book club and identify with which one that you are. And it helps you figure out more of yourself. But something that was really important to me about this book that I didn't realize until later, because I didn't have the language to explain it, was that Sailor Moon is probably the first mainstream property I engaged with that was queer and like didn't make a big deal out of it. It's just like Usagi is queer. Like she spends the whole first book following around girls she thinks is pretty and like bringing them into her squad.
One of my screenshots from this volume was she's like, that was so scary. She's a Shinto priestess and I'll forgive anything if someone's pretty enough. And I'm like, Sailor.
She's so friggin' gay. It's like she's obviously head over heels in love with Tuxedo Mask, but all these, she's like, oh God, she's so pretty. She needs to be over here. Like just put her next to me. It's fine. And then like later in the series, when you meet some more of the scouts, like Sailor Uranus is genderqueer. Like sometimes they're presenting as a woman, sometimes they're presenting as a man. And I'm pretty sure I'm remembering right that Sailor Moon kisses Sailor Uranus in both gender presentations. So then there's like more genderqueer characters, the Starlights that come in later, and I'm pretty sure Sailor Moon kisses another one of them. Like there's just like a lot of this stuff where it's like, and it just happened and we're not going to explain it or talk about it. It's just like just a whole bunch of characters here are queer and that's just what it is. So that was, I think, really important for me growing up to see like, oh yeah, this is fine. Like nobody's making a big deal out of this and you don't need to put a label on it if you don't want to, but it's just, she's attracted to this character and they are also a woman and they're going to kiss and it's fine. She's going to go back to her boyfriend. Don't worry about it. She kissed a girl and she liked it.
Yeah. Well, no, it's interesting. Like, so this is all, you're reading just the manga with this, right? And you're experiencing this. So Paloma, I don't remember if you said, did you read the manga as well? Or were you just like an anime kid for this show? And did some of this stuff also make it through to the anime?
So the anime is infamous. I will say I don't know the outer senshi as well. I just haven't read that far. I was at the mercy of Toonami, so whatever they showed. But the anime is infamous. They redubbed it, so maybe it's not the same now, for making Sailor Neptune and Sailor Uranus cousins. And they're
instead of
lovers.
Gay.
Yep.
Oh.
Like they're in a committed relationship in the manga and everyone knows it. And in the Japanese anime, they're together. And in the American version, they were like too gay. They're cousins. That's why they're so close.
Yeah. That's better. They're just committed cousins. Yeah. That's better.
Well, they like cut out a couple scenes that were also like more overtly romantic.
Sure.
Yeah, but
interesting.
The characters are actually some of them are quite different in the anime. So years later, when I revisited, I love Sailor Mars. I'm Sailor Mars girly, but I was Sailor Mars girly based off of her. She's extra fiery, if you will. And the anime, always butting heads with Sailor Moon. Later in life, I was like their OTP material because they have that cat, not like that dog-cat dynamic. But the Sailor Mars who you've met is more stoic, way more priestess and like dutiful in that regard. Sailor Mars is
Mhm.
as well in the anime, but she's boy crazy as well in the anime. She is absolutely not boy crazy at all in the
No,
manga.
she like hates men. That's like
Yes.
her core
Yeah.
characteristic in the first
Yeah.
volume.
That is not true. She lusts after Darien. I don't know his name in Japanese currently. And she's just really butting heads with Usagi. And what I like about the manga and appreciate about the manga is that the friendship is a lot more present in the beginning, and you can see
Mm,
the trust in Usagi or believing in Usagi as much more like genuine and sooner. Whereas in like the anime, to like Kara's point earlier, where like it's written and drawn by men, they have that like girls butting heads and clashing and just really
mhm.
ragging on Usagi. And the manga's just way more girl power from jump, and like girls being friends and trusting in each other, and like
Mhm.
less
Yeah.
catty than the, and at least for like Sailor Mars and Sailor Moon, like they butt heads. Sailor Mars has like no respect for that girl for a very long time.
Oh, jeez. Well, it's funny that you say that. You bring that up because I almost found it funny how instantly trusting these girls were. Now I get it, story's got to move, but also that is me as like a 35-year-old man being like, you can't just be friends with someone overnight like that, and that is absolutely not the case, right? So I found so you know what, this is kind of nice. By the end of the volume, the four girls, they kind of have to come together to solve this big mystery with fucking tuxedo mask there.
Uh-huh.
And where they meet the princess. I thought that was a really cute story where they like have to go meet Princess D or whatever, and yada yada yada. And she can't see anything, she's so pretty, and then she puts the glasses on. They're all like, hold on a second, is the nerdy guy in our school maybe a hottie without his glasses? I was like, hold on a second, hold on.
Oh,
But yeah,
Mike.
I did like the way that like the friendships just kind of, there was no questioning it. There was no should we be friends? Should we, like, there was no build up. There's just like, hey, we're part of the Sailor Scouts. That means you and I can swap lunches. We can do all this other stuff. We'll immediately hang out every day after school. I really really like that. I thought that was like very very nice. Not only from like a we got to move the story along perspective, but like just this inherent trust between these four girls. It drives the story and becomes like a core component of like the end of the volume where Sailor Moon has to like be this leader in the final moments, and apparently get semi-kidnapped by Tuxedo Mask. But we haven't gotten to Tuxedo Mask, but I got a lot of questions and thoughts. So
We can get
but
into him right now because I was just
yeah.
about to say, Mike, you were talking about the one of my favorite chapters of the whole Sailor Moon run, which is the Masquerade Ball. Because, like, all right, so in this volume, Sailor Moon gets a magical pen that she gets because Sailor Mercury, the smart one,
Mm-hmm.
has beat the video game in the arcade that leads to their secret base, but they don't know that yet. And the machine gives her a pen, which she doesn't know will soon transform her into Sailor Mercury. But when Sailor Moon sees the pen, she's like, I want one, and starts kicking the machine until another pen comes out.
Yeah.
And this other pen like helps her transform into just whatever costume she needs to get wherever place she needs to go to like help people and save people.
Mm-hmm.
So she finds out about this masquerade ball that's being held for this princess with treasure, and they know they're all looking for this crystal that the bad guys are looking for. And so she's like, we have to go investigate for reasons. We have to investigate. We have to go to the masquerade ball. And the pen transforms her into a pretty, pretty princess. So again, these 14-year-olds sneak into the ball because I think part of the magic of the transformation is like they look older than their age.
Mm-hmm.
So they go into the masquerade ball, and she like gets tipsy on a cocktail and ends up like dancing with Tuxedo Mask, who's also there. And again, as like a 13-year-old reading this, I was like, this is the most romantic thing in the whole world. Oh my God. Oh my God. She's swooning on a couch and he's kissing her and they're having a moment, even though, and then like, of course, now reading it, I'm like, she's unconscious. Get the fuck away from her. But
I
like
know,
at the time, I was
I
like,
know.
oh, they're having a moment.
He kisses her like 3 times and she's unconscious. What the fuck is this guy's problem?
They're soul bonded, Mike. You wouldn't understand. Okay, but like then we go into like the whole fucking Twilight thing, and I'm just like,
I know. We don't have to. We don't have to get into
we
that
don't have
here
time.
today.
But
Yeah.
That's probably my biggest problem revisiting this manga. I'm like, oh right, there was a lot of these literal children can and should be having relationships or crushes on men who are significantly older, and like reading it at the time, you don't really. He's 17.
He's like 17, right?
He's 17.
I understand.
There's like
I put I put this in my notes. I kind of understand the idea of like a 14-year-old girl crushing on this high school boy, right? Like that's a thing. That's a thing that
Yeah,
happens
that's
in
the
real
Romeo
life,
and Juliet
right?
age dynamic.
Right.
Not
And so
saying
I
that's great
understand
either.
it. The fact that it goes beyond a crush is where it's kind of like, "Ugh, I guess, ooh, this is kind of gross. But his justification for wanting to find this crystal is maybe the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life. Like, come on, you lost your memories and only the crystal can fix you? Come on, bud. Who told you this? I need to read more Sailor Moon just to figure out this dumb guy's backstory.
I would love for you to keep reading Sailor Moon and figure out the backstories because
I
you
bought
stopped
4 volumes.
You stopped right before the chips all fall on the table. Like you are
Amazing.
almost there. It all opens up from here.
Well, I've got 3 more volumes to read. I bought them. They're sitting in my Kindle library. This is a thing that's happening in my life. So
I'm so proud of you, Mike.
Well, I think I have a couple questions.
Yes.
I think that I would love for the both of you to answer.
Yes.
So I imagine there's more of these sailors. I think that's a thing you've said. There's like the core, and then there's more. I imagine there's an entire solar system of Neptune or sailors, right? Neptune and Pluto, and so on and so forth.
Yep.
I guess like, does this cast just infinitely grow, or is it like there's like a dozen of them and that's kind of the story?
Great question. Yes.
Paloma, your thoughts.
Okay. So we've got the Inner Scouts, whom you've met, Mike, and then you will soon meet the Outer Senshi, which are Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto. And so, of course, when Pluto was no longer deemed to be a planet, you can imagine the devastation. Pluto's actually Pluto might be my favorite Sailor Scout. Like my Inner Senshi is 100% Sailor Jupiter, and that's the one I connect with most. But man, the second they showed Sailor Pluto, I was like, this is it. She's the one. Like, she's my favorite. Love her very much. And then there's like, you get into Sailor Chibi Moon, which is the part that I really wanted you to get to, Mike, which is Sailor Moon's time traveling daughter who has her same powers but different hair. And the look on your face is exquisite. And then there's like,
excuse me,
there's
like,
other there's other scouts that we find out about later that are like less important than the core ones that we've discussed. There's like some scouts that are scouts of asteroids. There's a really cool panel at one point where for like literally 2 seconds we see that Sailor Mars has 2 like demi scouts that are from like the moons of Mars. So there's a whole elaborate thing.
Oh,
but
that's the Phobos and Deimos thing, right?
Sure.
Where like, okay.
Yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot of them, but you only really need to worry about the ones named after planets and Pluto.
Okay, that makes sense. I mean, like, I feel like there's an infinite number of planets and stars out there, so there potentially could be an infinite number of scouts. I guess, okay. That answers some questions. I did feel like I got a little with the Eternal versions that I read. It's funny, there were these like weird spots in some of the pages where there's just a lot of blankness, and then they would just put like a chibi character. I thought that's interesting. That spot was filled originally with notes, which I would have loved to read. I love reading those. Like the back matter in manga volumes is like some of my favorite stuff to read. Like I don't think my experience reading the manga about Go. What's it called?
Hikaru no Go.
Hikaru no Go.
Yeah, Hikaru no Go. I don't think my experience would have been the same had I not read all the little mini comics about like the author's experience making the manga. So like I'm kind of bummed that that's not in there. Whatever, I guess one more day I'll find a scanlation or something like that. But yeah, so okay, that's fun. I guess my other question is Luna Sailor V?
No.
What the fuck? What is the point of this weird cat? Because I can't stand the cat. Can't stand the cat.
Mike, let me tell you
the cat
about one of my favorite Sailor Moon stories that comes later in the manga. Paloma's smiling because I'm pretty sure she already knows where I'm going with this. The one where Luna falls in love with an astronaut and asks to be turned into a real girl so that she can fall in love with the real astronaut who is also in love with another astronaut, and they're both supposed to go to the moon, but one of them's sick and Luna just wants him to get better. And there's like a whole subplot with like sugar star candy. So now whenever I see sugar star candy in like an Asian grocery, I have to get it and just be like, it's sweet like his kisses.
Oh My God. Okay.
And
Okay.
I'm like turning red. Oh God, Mike. And I have to tell you, while reading this book and being like, how would Mike interpret this book? Mike is probably thinking this is bonkers. And I'd say, Mike, Western superhero comics are also bonkers. This is just a different type of bonkers.
There was nothing that was so far-fetched that I was like, what's going on here? Like, this is a very straightforward manga to read. It's very wordy. There's a couple of pages where I was kind of lost what was actually happening, but it's really not important because they're like those filler panels where there's just like an action happening that gets you to the next scene, and that's fine. Yeah, there's nothing wild about this book. I think there's just like, I don't like, Luna was getting on my nerves eventually because I much prefer just the Sailor Scouts interacting with each other than Luna being like, hey, dummies, it's time to go to my underground base at this arcade and figure out a thing. And my favorite panel of the entire book does feature Luna, which is, this computer is connected to the main system on the moon with the cat with the little headphones on. I mostly just felt like Luna was annoying for a chunk of the book, but I don't know.
No, that's just because she's like, we have a mission and we need to do it. You just don't want to follow the rules. You want Sailor Moon to be able to like vibe and eat her snacks.
Yeah, exactly.
So Mike, you had questions about Tuxedo Mask. How can we help?
Why Tuxedo Mask? Why? Tuxedo Mask is a cool character from like a really like, he just shows up and he's got a mask and he's wearing a tuxedo. And Sailor Moon didn't figure out who the fuck he was from the get-go. Whatever, that's fine.
How
Clark
does
Kent,
anybody
Superman
not recognize
syndrome, right?
Clark Kent?
I understand. I feel like he's kind of a wiener guy and that he shows up and doesn't help and then just goes, I needed to do this, and then he just leaves.
Yes.
So I guess my questions are like, why Tuxedo Mask?
So first of all, you're getting to that in your next volumes. And
I know.
Second of all,
very clear.
There's just there's a meme online that I want to find now that's just Tuxedo Mask leaving with like his cape being dramatically drawn over the panel. Sometimes it's a GIF, sometimes it's like a 2-panel thing, and it's just like, here's an explanation that doesn't make any sense anyway, I'm leaving now, is like the meme format. I feel like that would resonate with you. Sure. I also think you'll be delighted to know that in the anime, whenever he showed up, castanets would play.
Yes.
Like a little like clicky clicky. Showed up. Because he's got a rose and it's all like a whole.
I'm curious to know what your thoughts are on Tuxedo Mask, Paloma, because you've experienced the anime, I think, significantly. So like, what are your feelings about Tuxedo Mask on the whole?
Ultimately, at the end of the day, the Scouts don't need him, but I love him as I love his presence. I feel like he's a male wife or whatever you call him. I feel like he's a male
damsel
wife
in distress.
Yeah. Yes.
He's the damsel in distress.
Yes.
He is the function of the damsel in distress. He is there to like look pretty and be saved by the hero. Okay. And you will see this recurring theme, and like there's a little bit more to it and stuff, but for all intents and purposes, like he is the damsel in distress, and he's also very handsome and shows up in a tuxedo. So like, I don't know, like every girl I knew who was reading these books with me in high school is like, he's so dreamy, except not like that, because that's not actually how teen girls talk to each other.
Sure.
But
was the vibe the same for you, Paloma, when you were watching the anime? I don't know.
Yeah, I thought he was cool. I thought he was so cool, and then we just learned more about him. I'm like, this is a cool dude. Yeah, I'd date him. I definitely
went through part of why Sailor Moon's so important to me also is that was the first fandom that I really engaged with, like even before Harry Potter, because there was already so much stuff for Sailor Moon. Right. I was like, I got to get my books on eBay. What stuff is there like from the 90s from Japan, like in terms of toys, and like, can I get a transformation wand, and like people making their own Sailor Scout tiaras that you could buy online on like geosites and like this era of the internet, like pre-social media, finding my way around to different like things that you could get and interact with in terms of Sailor Moon stuff. And this was also my first experience being like, I could dress like the characters. So there was a good year where I was just checking eBay for silk top hats so I could like do this tuxedo mask thing. I never actually bought one, but I did end up getting some like rose earrings. They're like Sailor Jupiter's like rose earrings. I ended up achieving my dream in my late 20s of having 3 piercings on my lobes so I could match up to Sailor Mercury. Because like you're just reading
Or
this
Zorro
book, Mike.
from One Piece.
Okay, you're just reading this book, Mike, and I'm getting fashion tips. I'm like, look at all these earrings that they've got.
Right.
Look at how they're dressing. Everything's so sparkly.
For the listeners at home, Kara is completely decked out in like all of her Sailor Moon like garb, right? She's done her hair up in buns. I mean, not all the garb.
Not
excuse
all
me.
of it.
You're wearing jewelry. You're wearing
Yes.
a lot of jewelry that is Sailor Moon based. So, and it looks very nice.
Oh, thanks. And I like did my hair in little buns. My hair's not long enough to have the 6-foot train streaming out from them, but I did my best.
One day. Well, okay. So this is a very fun journey. As I said, I'm gonna continue reading because this book is fun and very easy to read. Like I said, it's very wordy, but like it's not a complex thing that I need to keep track of. It's very freak a week right now. I'm sure that things change as time goes on, like most manga. So yeah, I'm very excited that we got to have this conversation today. I didn't realize, Kara, that this went so deep for you. I thought there was like I love Sailor Moon. I didn't realize that this was like down to the bone for you.
No,
so
this was like my
exciting.
whole personality for a good 2 years. Like it was like this went right up against Teen Titans in terms of like things that formed me in the forge of adolescence. It was like Harry Potter was there all along, but then it was like Sailor Moon, like going into Teen Titans, and then them all kind of like swirling together. Like when I look back on like my journals from that time, or just the things that stick in my mind from that time of like how I wanted to present myself online, it all comes back to Sailor Moon. Like all the glowing transformation stuff and all the like having strong female friendships and jewelry being a source of power, like all this shit. It's just it's all there. It's all there. I think about, I put in the notes, this is my Roman Empire. Like I think about this shit all the time. This is where I learned the planetary symbols. This is where I started seeing like, oh, it's okay to be queer. Just so many things. I cut my hair short. Like when I had a pixie cut, I was like, finally, my dream of becoming Sailor Uranus. Like just like all of this stuff is just so directly inspiring so many things about me. So this book is very important to me. And I'm really proud of you for trying something new, Mike. Good job.
Of course. Well, I guess, Paloma, I'll pitch it over to you. Any final thoughts, any recommendations about what I should do in my next step on this Sailor Moon journey?
I feel like you have to go to YouTube and watch some of the old Deke dub clips just to know what it was like.
Ooh.
I'm assuming they're on there, I hope so, just to see that kind of voice acting. And ultimately, at the end of the day, I feel like Sailor Moon is just the epitome of like friendship and love wins at the end of the day. Mm-hmm. I love having a main character that isn't striving to be the best or the strongest. She just needs to get the job done at the end of the day so she can play her games and have her snacks. just great friendship, all different girls, and then back to like how it was so easy that they all like trusted each other. That's the power of being lonely, and then you meet one very nice, goofy girl who isn't so smart and just wants to hang. Mm-hmm. And
that's Mike. Mike is Sailor Moon. He's assembled the scouts.
Finally, it all comes together.
I've said this before. You just didn't realize how relevant it was to you, Mike.
Yeah, it's all the pieces are clicking together now. Thank you. Well, thank you both for joining me this week. This was a lot of fun. Like I said, I am going to read more. I'm very excited to go on this Sailor Moon journey. Who knows how deep it's actually going to go? But I at least have 4 volumes ahead of me that I'm determined to read.
You call us when you get to the Dark Moon Saga, Mike.
When I get to we'll have maybe we'll revisit this in the future with the two of you. But for now, next week's show is going to be me and Kate and Paul. We're going to be talking to a special guest, Bijan Aga, who was on the show before talking about a Kickstarter. They're coming back to just chat comics with us. It's going to be really fun. Infinity Shred is the best band in the universe. They do all of our music. We can't thank them enough. Zander's Tuxedo Mask, I think. In that we all love him. Like I'm Sailor Moon, Xander's Tuxedo Mask. This is right. Anyways, thank you, Zander, for editing the show. We love you. I want to say thank you to Danny for proof listening this week. Thank you to everyone who hung out with us live on Discord. You're fantastic. And if you got this far in the episode, you're a fantastic human being, and we love you so much. Until next time, though, comics are good, and so are you.